Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. First off, I would like to thank the IAB for having us here to discuss this very important topic. It's obviously been no secret over the past couple of years, been quite a bit of disruption to all aspects of life, but in the world of digital marketing, in that span, I've really been encouraged to see our industry come together and how we are all working to innovate in order to provide an even better future in the world of digital advertising. During this session, we'll specifically be looking at the disruption in the world of addressability and how it's come to the forefront with a much deeper focus on consumer privacy, the fact that there's the looming deprecation of the cookie, the elimination of IDFA, and the emergence of obviously a number of new privacy regulations. We've had conversations with a number of people across the ecosystem, from buyers to publishers to tech providers, both on the supply and the buy side. And we believe that this disruption is actually going to present an opportunity in the future for people to put themselves in a strong position to continue their success despite some of the changes that are upcoming in our industry. So I'd like to start off with some quick introductions. My name is Matt Riccio. I'm the Regional Vice President of Advertiser Solutions here at PubMatic. In this role, I'm very fortunate to be able to talk with buyers and understand what their needs are, both now and in the future, and get a sense for what they're looking at, when they're looking to accomplish, the providers they're investigating, and some of what they're actually seeing out there, so that it helps us shape what we do in terms of what products we need to bring to bear, what types of solutions are important to them, and what's most keeping them up at night. Joining me is my great colleague, Alena Morris, and I'll let her speak to her own background.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. So I am Alena Morris. I'm our Director of Product Marketing across our audience addressability and identity efforts here at PubMatic. So I work really closely with Matt and the rest of his team and our publisher team to really, as Matt said, connect with our customers, understand what they're worried about, how we can best build our products to support them, and really just have a point of view of where we're heading, especially as it relates to addressability and identity. Prior to PubMatic, I was at Quantcast. I led product marketing there for identity as well, and actually across our privacy and consent management space, specifically focusing on GDPR in the EMEA market, as well as CCPA here in the US, and how that was really affecting how our North America marketers ran their advertising and operated their business. So I just highlight that to really say that it's colored the way that I think about addressability and identity, as I'm sure you'll see as we're going through some of our recommendations and point of view today. And then prior to that, I just spent several years on the publisher side at CBS Interactive. So yeah, excited to be here and discuss this topic with Matt and share our recommendations on how to take this forward.
Thanks, Alena. And I love the fact that you were able to join me for this conversation. And I really do think that it's illustrative of how we're having conversations throughout the ecosystem about this topic. And I really wanted to talk more about what I've heard coming from my position working with buyers and what they're thinking about when it comes to privacy safe, measurable environments across the open web. And really what they've started to talk about is the questions that they have. All over the map, they are talking about whether or not there's going to be scale, whether or not one provider is better than the other, what's the difference between probabilistic and deterministic IDs. And as we're continuing to navigate all these concerns, we're starting to hear different phases come about. We're starting to, it started out with, should we look at contextual? Should we look at first-party identifiers? Are there other solutions that are available to us? So as buyers have dug in, I feel like there's only been more questions. But I think now, as we refocus and think about the timelines of this topic and what the future will bring, we've started to see individual buyers become more cognizant of which specific solutions are going to make the most sense for them. And I think what we want to talk about more as we go through this session is what are the different actions that some of these buyers can take in order to solve for this addressable future. to
Hey,
start
Matt,
out,
if I can, just really quickly, sorry, just to jump in really fast. One thing I just want to add on this, on the last slide of like, this space that we're in right now, is that we did see with the Google delay, or I should say with the Google announcement of their delay of deprecation of cookies, we did see a little bit of a slowdown in terms of testing. But I just want to highlight here that what we've seen in the last, like, I would say 4 to 6 to 8 weeks is that testing and interest in like how we want to move this all forward has really ramped up. And I think it's added a layer of complexity to what Matt just described, in the sense that like now people are looking at it beyond just like, what are the new approaches that I need to look at for desktop? And they're starting to say, what does it look like for desktop? What does it look like for CTV, for OTT? What does it look like in North America versus EMEA versus Brazil versus Singapore? Like everyone has I sort of feel like from our recent conversations that people are really jumping back in like 2 feet into the water. And the conversation has actually advanced from where we were 3 to 6 months ago into this new, like even more complex kind of point of view of like the approaches that we take maybe in North America might differ from what we're doing elsewhere. And we need to have a sense of what that's going to look like so that we can share it with either our customers or for an agency, or we can have a strong point of view of like from advertiser direct perspective. So just wanted to add that 2 cents in.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's definitely some great points to add to it, because like I said, the more we're sitting here listening to each other, the more we're able to learn about what the different intricacies are and what we need to do in order to make sure that we're taking the right actions moving forward. So one of the things that we've done is actually partnered with some unbiased partners in the industry. We've been talking with Digiday and working with them on actually doing some research on what some of the potential solutions are. And some of this data that we actually pulled predates any sort of changes to Google's timeline on when cookies might be going away. But what we were hearing from buyers, and by the way, I should not just say buyers, I should say we've been hearing this across both buyers and publishers, is what are the themes of future addressable solutions. And 3 of the things that really keep on coming to the top are things like first-party data collection, contextual targeting, and unique ID solutions. And I think, from my own experience in talking to buyers, I think the first one that people tended to lean towards were contextual. It was something that they were familiar with. It was, the first wave of digital advertising back in the early 2000s was about having your ads appear next to the most contextually relevant content, because that's where your best consumers probably were going to be. If you were looking for a camera, you'd go to cnet.com and read the reviews on cameras and see an ad for Canon, for example. So as cookies go away and some of the things that have and advancements that have happened over the past 15, 20 years are starting to again cycle back, that was the first thing people naturally went towards. But then they also started to think about ways in which they could still target specific people with a specific message, because that's what made programmatic advertising and digital advertising in general so successful. So we ran this survey and took input from buyers and sellers of media across the ecosystem, and these were some of the things that came to the forefront. And I know, Alena, you worked pretty closely with Digiday on this, and so you even have a little bit more experience in exactly what some of that feedback was.
Yeah, what I would just add here is that, like, as Matt mentioned, this was a research study that we conducted before Google's announcement. We have done our own internal surveys post-announcement, and it's encouraging because like the answers that we received through this survey and through our most recent survey are consistent across what people are trying to test and build out as part of their strategy. So that's really great to see. I think the other thing that stands out to me in terms of the responses that we got is that you'll see on the bottom, our buyers are interested in data collaborations housed in protected ecosystems. Here, they're essentially talking about clean rooms, which I think is really having a moment and will continue to into 2022. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in this presentation, but I just want to highlight it as something additional that's notable to me as part of this data.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. As we started to dig in even further with buyers, knowing that these are the types of things that were most important to them, both on, again, on the buy side and on the sell side. We started to look at what the providers are that were out there and really started digging in on specific testing. So we started testing with supply curation and with contextual providers that were able to look at the content of a page or a video and see exactly what that could do in terms of enhancing performance. We started looking at obviously all the unique identifiers out there and talking with all the data providers out there and seeing what their solutions could potentially provide from reaching individuals. And then we started to see a lot more interest directly in first-party signals, publisher first-party data. Google had an announcement within the past few days specifically about how they're tackling that. So there's been a number of ways in which we have actually started testing each of these pillars in terms of future addressability. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of these in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. One thing I'll just note on these areas where we're building out, like we're not here today to talk about like what PubMatic is building, but we do highlight where we're building because those are the opportunities where, we're engaging with our buyers on where they can start testing out. So that's why, we want to speak to that. One quick thing I do want to touch on, just as it relates to cohorts, that I think is interesting and worth noting. We're not going to touch at all on any cohort testing because obviously that initiative has been on pause since Google made their announcement. But I do just want to highlight that they are picking that effort back up in Q1 of 2022. And the reason why they paused and now they're revisiting is because that original Flock proposal had some privacy concerns. And so they're coming back to kind of rebuild Flock 2.0, where privacy will be more at the front and center. And I think that that's notable from an advertiser perspective, because one of the things that they're looking at is cutting down on the number of topics that we're going to be able to target through these cohorts. And thus, granularity of targeting will become a lot more diluted. So I think as an advertiser, if you're thinking about cohorts, if you're interested in what Google is doing with Flock, if you're interested in how the W3C is building that out, if you're concerned about the targeting capabilities through that at all, I would totally recommend participating in those conversations that the W3C holds, as well as the other conversations that are going on across the industry. So that's it from me on cohorts, but absolutely, Matt. So let's talk about what we are seeing in terms of what buyers should actually be testing. What should they be testing? What are they testing? What are they seeing? Like, how can we leverage what we're learning from those campaigns to really provide a recommendation to other buyers who might be looking to start too? Where I want to start this conversation, though, is really around how do we measure what success means for these campaigns? If you're a buyer and you're just getting started in running ID campaigns, I'll tell you right now, like we're not measuring these campaigns in the same way that we would measure like a third-party cookie campaign. It's evolving technology. It's new technology. It's not apples to apples. So we've kind of had to have that conversation with all of our buyers about like, what is the best way for us to measure what success looks like as we're moving forward into this new frontier? So what I'll start with is like, we always recommend to our buyers to set up 2 PMP deals whenever they're running a campaign with an ID. The first one, we like to do it against the third-party cookie, same way we would set it up today. The second PMP, we want to run specifically against that ID. Everything else stays the same. So everything else is the control. So we're really looking at performance, as we'll get into, of the cookie versus the ID. So that's first and foremost, like the way that we really approach this with our customers who are running against IDs. Then we want to look at specifically the effectiveness of that ID. What is effectiveness? First, we look at like, do the pipes work? Like, can we run the campaigns? Are the dollars flowing? That's literally the bare minimum. So that's pretty much the first thing that we want to make sure is happening. Second, scale. Scale is something that we talk and we hear a lot about with our buyers. I know Matt will share a little bit of his perspective on this. So do we have the scale to run? What do the daily avails look like? Like, what's our deliverability going to be? So if I have a buyer who comes to the table and uploads 100,000 ramp IDs, what does that daily avail really come down to? Like, how many impressions can we deliver? And then finally, we're looking at budget. Like, what's the price that we can hit this campaign at. And that's going to be from our primary KPI kind of set of goals. Secondary goals are going to be around more like classical or classic performance metrics, hitting budget caps, looking at conversion events. But those are really after we've assessed like that first set of KPIs. I'll just note here that measurement is really a big question mark right now that comes up in a lot of our meetings with advertisers, not just for IDs, like certainly for IDs, but not just for IDs, really for any of the evolving approaches. And Matt's going to get into some of our recommendations around that later on. So Matt, do you want to touch on, I know you've heard a little bit about scale in market. Do you have anything to add around like these KPIs?
No, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of buyers out there that are absolutely looking at what that measurement looks like. And so they're testing what they can today. They're testing, okay, can I still reach? Can I still get enough scale? Are there enough IDs in the bid stream in order to be able to measure whether or not I'm even hitting my audiences? So I think a lot of buyers are taking that approach of, okay, let's at least get the sense of what's available to us out there. We'll run some A/B tests against this versus some cookie-based campaigns and seeing what we're able to get out of them both. It's almost, again, going back to a day before cookies were prominent and that type of tracking was available, that we're just trying to see if our sales go up or if we see more reach until we can, assess whether or not these solutions are going to be the best things for us moving forward. And that obviously is going to vary from one advertiser to the next, because one advertiser might be worried more about overall reach and branding. Another one might be worried about having a cash register ring. But so we're hearing a lot of different methodologies, but I would say overall, the feedback that I've been getting is we're going to have to figure out how to solve for this, because digital marketing is a key component of how we drive sales. And so how can we at least find some interim measures, make sure that we're testing all the things that are available to us now before it becomes a huge problem? Yeah,
absolutely. And I would just add one more thing on the scale point is like, especially for some of these bigger IDs that we're testing against now, scale is, we don't even really necessarily need to check scale. Like we have scale actually, as we'll see as we move to the next slide. In some of the bigger IDs, like we have the scale that we need to run campaigns. And so I think we're really at a point where like, let's test as much as we can. And we don't need to necessarily worry, depending on the audience, about that scale question. Okay, cool. So I want to talk about IDs that we are seeing the most action, I guess you could say, against. I want to take a step back before I dive into these two specific ones and just like level set on the fact that there are two main kinds of IDs, deterministic and probabilistic IDs. Deterministic IDs are the type of ID that says this person is who they are. Like it's based in a factual piece of information like an email or a phone number. So if someone had a deterministic identity on me, Alena, they would know like wherever I go, Alena at PubMatic, that's Alena. That's what she's doing. That's what she's interested in. So deterministic is very accurate. It's based in the user. It should be rooted in consent. Probabilistic is a little bit different. It combines a lot of different signals that are available to us across the open web. Typically, we combine those signals using machine learning to really produce like the best guess of who a user is. It typically has a lot more scale than a deterministic ID, but can be a bit less accurate just due to the nature that it's not based in like a known piece of information. So I just highlight that because we've seen the most testing specifically against Ramp ID, which is a deterministic ID, and Panorama ID, which is a probabilistic ID. I've included just a few stats here to give a sense of scale, also lift on the publisher side. So what we've heard about these IDs, specifically I'll start with Ramp ID first, is that you simply are getting greater impression delivery with greater reach at a lower cost. So we're actually seeing a lot of success against these early campaigns. In fact, in our campaigns with Ramp ID, we're seeing up to 70% greater reach versus cookies in Safari and Firefox. And then likewise with Panorama ID, which is Lodome's ID. This is a probabilistic ID. We're seeing on average about 15 to 25% increase in reach in Safari and Firefox there. So if we're looking just at that, key KPI that we just went over around reach, both of these IDs are performing really well compared to cookies in Safari and Firefox environments, which has been encouraging to us and to our customers just to see that, okay, like we are starting to see really good, really good to us performance metrics of some of these early campaigns. Now, that's in terms of reach. One other thing I do want to highlight about these IDs is that we're seeing that these fit into different parts of a marketer's funnel. So deterministic IDs like Ramp ID, because they're based in that true email, we found in partnership with our customers that these are actually better suited for like your retargeting and your lower funnel type campaigns. Whereas a probabilistic ID is a bit better for like prospecting, consideration. So it sits above maybe more of like your mid-funnel tactics. So I just think that that's a really important thing to highlight, because what we're seeing happen is that deterministic and probabilistic IDs are becoming separate but complementary parts of a plan and of an overall advertiser strategy. So that's what we're seeing so far. I guess the other thing I would just highlight is that like there's tons of different deterministic and probabilistic IDs out there. Ramp ID and Pano ID are just 2 of 80, I think, like ad exchanger set are out in market now. So if you're an advertiser looking to, build out your strategy, I would kind of get a sense of those different types of IDs, the scale of those IDs, as Matt highlighted, the match rates against different IDs that you have for your campaigns, and then kind of narrow in into like, what are those ones that you really should be testing?
And I'll just jump in with, looking at what the scale is today versus where we were with this 12 months ago. I remember doing some early tests back in Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year, where the number of impressions available were a fraction of what we're seeing today. So it's clear that we're continuing to make these advancements as more people talk within this industry and more partners start to connect with one another, that we're starting to see the scale out there. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is, help buyers and sellers connect, get the right audiences, get the right performance. And by, making these advancements over the past several months, it's clear that we're headed in the right direction to be able to solve for this problem and make sure that we're all able to continue into the future. Alena, you did allude to some of the other ones, and I know we have a little bit of detail on some of the other IDs that are out there. I know that advertisers from my conversations are definitely, thinking of their specific situations and which ID partner is right for them. So obviously having some flexibility and understanding what each one of these providers' strengths and weaknesses is obviously important. So I know we have a little bit of detail on some of the other ones, if you just want to jump into a little bit about those.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, Ramp ID and Pano ID are only 2 of many that are out there. And they're not the only IDs that we're seeing substantial scale against. They just happen to be the only IDs that we're seeing scaled buyer testing against, but I think there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll get into that on this slide. So I think what I wanted to do here was just showcase that there are other IDs, to Matt's point, that have scale. Like there are other options out there. So as an individual advertiser, like you do need to assess and test like what ID is going to be best for my my clients or this campaign or whatever it might be. So I've highlighted 3 here that we wanted to just mention. I'll start with PubCommon ID. PubCommon ID, we see substantial publisher implementation of, and I think our opinion around that has been because for publishers, we've just heard that it's an easier ID for them to adopt. It's based in a first-party cookie. It's not a random identifier. It's not reliant on any email collection. So it's just like a bit more lightweight from a publisher perspective. From an advertiser perspective, I think the reason why we're not seeing a lot of adoption on this one is because it's really site specific. Like there's no cross domain, there's no cross device. So we just haven't seen from our customers like a lot of interest in that. Now, what I will say is that starting next year, DV360 is going to start accepting PubCommon ID. So buyers may be encouraged to start ramping up testing, just like given the fact that this is the only ID that Google is really going to be accepting. So it'll be interesting to see like what starts happening with that moving into the new year. Criteo, we also see great publisher adoption on. This is one of the IDs that we turn on by default through our publisher tool called ID Hub. So we do have really strong scale with this one. But Criteo ID is proprietary to their DSP only. So from our perspective, like that's probably why we're just not seeing as much buyer adoption. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on UID 2.0. One thing that stands out to me on this one is that we had really, really strong publisher adoption of 1.0. We actually had more than 800 publishers who were leveraging that ID. But obviously, like UID adoption from the pub side is a lot less. And that's really consistent with what we've been hearing from our buyers in the sense that the scale is just not there yet to test. So people haven't been, our customers haven't been interested in running against that as of yet. I will highlight, though, that just in the last week or so, I think that the Trade Desk just released their first case study of 2.0 testing in Canada. So that does seem promising, and we might see some more movement here heading into the new year. And I'll be excited and curious to see what happens with that one. So, Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these other IDs.
Yeah, I think everything that you said is right. Like there's less adoption of some, there's more interest in others. The limitations on some may prevent, obviously, in a Criteo situation, if you're not using Criteo's DSP for retargeting or some other initiative, you might not be able to access their ID. So maybe that's not the right one for you. But for somebody who's using Criteo and is really interested in direct response, that's one of those performance metrics that people are concerned about going into a cookieless future. And so if you have a provider that is very strong at retargeting and can provide you with the ability to reach your first party audiences in that way, obviously that one might make more sense for you. So I think, again, as we've talked about, there's not one size fits all solution here. And I think that that's what's going to become really important is that we all take a look, see what those options are, and make sure that we're helping buyers understand which one is going to be the best scenario for meeting each one of their needs.
Yeah.
That sort of ties into other options that are out there, things that are starting to become a little bit more well-known, things like targeting or leveraging publishers' own first-party data, those publishers that have logins and have that type of information. I know Google in the past couple of days has announced initiative around this. What can we talk about in terms of those first-party initiatives and what we're seeing there with our publishers?
Yeah, for sure. Like let's talk a little bit more about that. I think as we saw from that Digiday research, everyone's focused on first-party data, publishers and buyers alike. Everyone's trying to grow their first-party data. I think it makes sense. I think first-party data initiatives are viewed. What's the right saying? I can't think of it now, but they're looked upon very fondly because first-party data is your own. Like you can control it, you can protect it. Hopefully, you don't have to worry about like risks with universal IDs or hashing or whatever. So first-party data is a really interesting opportunity for a lot of folks in the industry. One particular initiative that we've been participating in and trying to build out is this work around standardized publisher first-party segments. So there is an industry initiative going on led by Prebid and the IAB. This approach has received a lot of positive feedback from buyers and sellers alike. Because it's based, to your point, strictly on publishers' first-party data. So, one of I guess my main learning that I will share about this initiative is that I think it's great because it standardizes the segments across publishers, which coming from CBS Interactive and now working, more closely with our buyers, like I know everyone has a different definition for all sorts of different things. So like that standardization piece is really nice. And it could even apply over to spaces like OTT and CTV, which I know is an important platform for us now too. One of the challenges is that, because we're stripping the third-party cookie in these initiatives, there's just a lot of technical challenges in terms of like building out the pipes and running the actual campaigns that do need to be worked through. And I think that that's an important consideration if buyers want to leverage this approach at scale in the future. It does require the technical investment now to really build it out successfully. And this is another one of those initiatives, similar to what I said earlier about like all of the cohort work, where us, our buyers, our publishers, like we need to be involved in the industry working groups to collaborate to really build this out successfully. So that's my point of view on the first party segment initiative. One big piece of feedback that I'll just share, from what we've been out in market talking about this, privacy and protection of first party data, whether it's from an advertiser or from a publisher point of view, is so important. Like, obviously, like it can't be understated or overstated. Everyone is concerned about their own data. There's a lot of money going into like growing that set. So it's something that we and others really need to take seriously moving into the future.
100% agree. And I've had some buyers talk to me about leveraging publisher first party data and how they could go about using it and the privacy implications. And they are eager to test, though. I think to the earlier points that people don't want to wait. People do want to get some tests going, see what works best in their specific situations. But one of the things that actually does come up a lot around privacy is, and you alluded to this earlier, is the concept of clean rooms and how they've started to sprout up more. You did mention I do have people that I know at clean rooms, so it's something that's top of mind for me. What's your take on clean rooms and how they're going to evolve?
Yeah, for sure, it's a hot topic right now, and I think heading into 2022 it will continue to be. Truthfully, like I don't have as much concrete information to share here as I did on something like identifiers. And I just think that's just the nature of like, we're just much further along, I think, in terms of testing out and really building out that opportunity around IDs versus clean rooms. But I want to acknowledge that there is there's a lot of industry movement here right now. Amazon has been working on their clean room for a couple of years. They just released it to market, I think, in the last couple of weeks. One interesting thing I think about their initiative is that they really talk about measurement and attribution a lot within that clean room, which that's the first I've heard measurement and attribution really talked about in conjunction with a clean room. So that's a really interesting development. And I'm really curious to see how that evolves and how that plays out in other clean rooms. And then, Disney's put out a lot of press recently. They're partnering with leading clean rooms to offer this technology out to market. So we're seeing a lot of industry movement. And then the second thing is like many of our clients are interested in this too. We're hearing in a lot of our meetings recently, there's interest in first party data initiatives, and that leads us to clean rooms. So these conversations are really happening hand in hand. And there's a lot of emphasis and focus on this area right now from our customers specifically. So I definitely anticipate that this is going to gain even more momentum leaning into 2022. And I'm curious and excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's definitely something that I've heard a lot more from buyers. In the limited time we have left, I would love to move ahead with what we think are some of the things that people and buyers and publishers should be thinking about, some recommendations we have in mind as we move into a future without cookies. And I think we've really talked about this a lot over the past 30 minutes or so. It's a lot about testing. It's making sure that you're looking at all the identity solutions that are out there, which one might be right for you, which one's going to offer you the best chance to get your KPIs, whether it be reach or direct response. Don't look at just one, be flexible and be as open as possible to different alternatives. Continue any testing you've been doing, ramp it up, even though things have slowed down over the past couple of months. I think, and that certainly in the conversations I've had, people definitely tap the brakes a little bit. I think it's not a time to slow down. I think it's time to continue ramping up that testing and making sure that you're prepared for when this does happen. Continue to ask questions about the measurability and the scalability of any of those identity providers and publishers that you're going to be working with. For sure, there's going to be some that are better than others, and you just got to look at the right ones that are going to meet your needs. But if I could make one recommendation, it's for all of us to be talking together. At the end of the day, if we're all talking, we're all learning. And I think the more we talk to each other, publishers, tech providers, buyers alike, we're going to learn what situations are going to max out our best potential for a cookieless future. And despite all the challenges, despite all the changes, despite the delays, I could say that all the results that we've seen up to this stage have been very encouraging, right? We're starting to see people be able to generate more reach, see better reach in different channels, whether it be desktop or mobile, see reach with different ID providers. The good news is that it's not the end of the world. I think with cookies going away, I think the automatic reaction, or at least the initial reaction, was, what's going to happen? This is bad for all of us, but it really isn't. I think what we're seeing is that the industry is going to continue to innovate the way it has over the past 20 years, continue to go with the trends, continue to find new ways to reach our customers and sell our products. And the initial results that we've seen on our end have certainly shown that that's probably going to be the case with this as well. So don't wait, continue to test. The results are there. We all just need to dig in, talk to each other, and find out what's right for all of us. So with that, Alena, thank you so much. I think all the information that you've presented here is tremendously valuable. I love hearing all the different details from you as to what the different identity providers and solutions are that are out there. I love being able to tell you about the experiences that we've had and feedback we've gotten from the buy side. I think this is all really helpful to continue this dialogue. So again, appreciate all that detail and for joining me on this session today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, IAB.